Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
We need to roll back the state. We spy on all of our own citizens. Our prisons are flooded with nonviolent drug offenders. If you want to know who America's next enemy is, look at who we're funding right now. Every single one of these problems are a result of government being way too big.
You're listening to Part of the Problem on the Gas Digital Network. Here's your host, Dave Smith.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein. We are the dynamic duo of autistic libertarians coming at you, saving the world, making libertarians a little bit less autistic while making the rest of the world a little bit more autistic.
Bridging the gap.
That is our measure. Yes, we will all meet at the shallow end of the spectrum. That is what we promise America. How are you feeling, Rob?
Well, first, I just want to state my outrage towards Canada. I feel like I did not survive the mRNAs in order to die from these pollutants. I don't know what they're doing. But
It's coming back.
it's back. I can't, dude. I need to be able
Is it
to.
bad by you?
Yes, I need to be able to open up my windows, not have to smell my farts, and walk around a little bit. This is driving me nuts.
You know what I'm so annoyed about? So I got a I
At
don't
least
know how
during
bad-
COVID, we had the skies, and the liberals were too dumb to go outside and enjoy it. You know?
Yeah, but for the rest of us who weren't terrified, we could just enjoy it. Out here today by me, it wasn't like bad like it was last time. It was just like a little bit of it was around, like a little. You could see there's a little bit of smoke. We're talking about the smoke from these Canadian wildfires. There seems to be another.
I'm trying to
round
save
of it.
myself with Yingling, the least gay of the beers. That's all you can do.
All you can do is drink a Yingling and hope for the best. But I got like a fucking weekend plan. Like I'm going to my my mother and father-in-law's place, and then we're supposed to go out on their boat for the weekend. So me and my wife and the kids are going to stay there. I checked the weather yesterday. The weather's beautiful. It's like 85 all weekend. It's going to be, and now I'm like, this might ruin the whole goddamn thing.
When you say for the weekend, do you mean like you get on the boat on Friday and then you're out
No.
for? Okay.
No, we're going to stay. My mother and father-in-law live near the water. So we're going to go stay at their place and go boating for 2 or 3
Have
days
a beer
in a row.
And fish for a couple hours.
Yes.
I get it.
Yeah.
That
So
makes
more
sense
like
to
that.
me.
That come back. There's those restaurants you can dock at, go eat at the restaurant. So it's just like, like a fun weekend. The kids love going to their grandparents' house, so it's fun. And now I'm like, oh man, this is like if it's like too smoky, this whole thing's going to be shot. No, who wants to go out fishing? I'm not going to take my kids out fishing with it all. And at this point, my daughter's she's 4.5, but she's old enough that she could do a little bit of the fishing and get into it, and stuff. And now you're like, are you Canadians ruining my weekend? We've gone to war over less. Iraq never ruined a weekend for a single American. Okay?
Wouldn't that be the greatest ever speech on Congress's floor?
Iraq never ruined a weekend, and look what we did to them. So consistency demands that we do more to Canada. All right, fine. I'm not advocating war in Canada, but watch it. What's going on? No
Let's
one's
put
ever
it out.
explained it to me.
It's like the opposite of a war. Instead of like napalm, let's just put the trees out.
And they're also like, they're kind of like, there's always wildfires, but they were particularly bad this year. And you're like, I'm 40 years old. I don't remember this ever happening. I don't ever remember smoke just covering the sky and having to live in this.
Or it's smelling like plastic and burning your eyeballs.
Yeah. Like what? I don't know. It's all very bizarre. Very, very bizarre. All right. Anyway. Robbie the Fire Burns, RobbieTheFire.com. Go there to check out all the porch tour dates. They're all finalized. They're all coming up. ComicDaveSmith.com. Go there and you'll get all the dates where me and Rob are coming together around the country. GasDigital.com. That's where you can go use promo code POTP for a 7-day free trial. Get access to all of our back episodes, plus the entire library of all the shows on the network. And also go check us out on Rumble. Even if you don't use Rumble, even if you just use YouTube or some other platform or whatever, go to Rumble and subscribe to our channel just in case we get booted off all this stuff one day. That's where we're gonna meet back up on Rumble. Then we get booted off Rumble and we make news for being the first ones ever to do that. And then just look for me begging for change outside a supermarket or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, so I wanted, first thing I wanted to discuss on this show, because after all, me and you, Rob, we are stand-up comedians. That's our day job. We do it at night, but it is our day job. That's what we started as. Me and Rob met each other in a comedy club, and that's how we became friends way before we were podcasting together. And that is our first love, doing stand-up comedy. And I also, I don't know about you, Rob. We've probably talked about this. I just don't remember because I don't pay attention when you talk. But I grew up a huge Saturday Night Live fan, humongous Saturday Night Live fan. And my time was in the 90s when I was about 10 years old. I found the show Saturday Night Live. I absolutely fell in love with it. The cast then, for my money, was the most talented ensemble of comedic geniuses I've ever seen in my life. Like, the cast back then was Sandler and Chris Farley and Mike Myers was still on the show. David Spade was still on the show. Of course, oh my God, freaking
Norm Macdonald.
Well, Norm Macdonald came on like a couple years after I found it. It was still before Norm Macdonald was on that. I'm just terrible with names.
Kevin Nealon.
Kevin Nealon was doing the Weekend Update, who's also a brilliant. Phil Hartman, the late great Phil Hartman, he was incredible. And I'm leaving off tons of guys here who are just like incredible talents.
Rob Schneider.
Rob Schneider was on there. I love Rob Schneider, by the way. That's my guy. We follow each other on Twitter. He's fucking awesome. Just all of it is so much talent. It was like unreal. Chris Rock was somewhere like on the bench, not even being used. Yeah, John Lovitz was on there. It was just like an incredible talent. And two of the people who were both on the show, I believe they were both on the show when I first started watching, was Dana Carvey and David Spade. And so anyway, here's a clip. I want to play it, and then I think me and you can talk about this a little bit and give our reaction. Let's play the clip.
I know. Dude, you know when I knew there was trouble? When anyone that came to our country didn't have to get a vaccine. And I go, if you're telling me I can't go to work, but everyone coming in doesn't have to get one, I go,
well, once we found out, when Fauci said, okay, I'm sorry, but if you've had 2 boosters and 2 vaccines, you can get and give COVID to another guy who's had 5 vaccines and 4 boosters.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between a vaccine and a booster? I don't know. It's just more vaccine, but booster sounds better. Anyway, a guy with 25 vaccines would get and give COVID to another guy with 25 vaccines. That's why I'm introducing the daily COVID shot. Every day you get a shot. By the time you get to your car, you got no immunity. But it's a beautiful 39 seconds.
So this just happened the other day, and I gotta say, Rob, I'm reminded of the Jon Stewart.
I hate it. Thank you.
Huh?
I love it when you and I don't talk about things and we just agree, because it infuriates me.
Well, I'm reminded of the Jon Stewart thing. Although, to be fair, just comedically speaking, the Jon Stewart bit was a much better bit. Like, this was just Dana Carvey kind of fucking around. But there is something just deeply infuriating about this. And it's hard to exactly put into words. But it's like, especially because at some level, and I'm a grown up now. I got kids and shit, and me and you are both like, I don't know, we're not kids. We've got our own fucking careers and all this, but on some level, you're still like, yo, you're the guys, like you're the guys I look up to. And what the fuck? Like, now you're gonna make this joke, but you guys would not make this joke when it was hilarious to make the joke. And you sat there and let us have to do it and take all the fucking bullets for it, take all the arrows. And then when like the smoke is cleared and you see which one of us haven't bled out to death, you know what I mean? And then you go like, all right, I guess I'll make the comment on the obvious hilarious thing here. The obvious thing in the room to make fun of. Which is like that. I'm not saying like you have to be a political commentator like me and you also are, in addition to being comedians. I'm not saying you have to do that, but I'm just saying you want to make fun of something. This is the obvious thing to make fun of. This is it. That this guy out here who told you couldn't get it, now he's on to like, oh, you have to have 6 and you have to. It's just like that's clearly where the spirit of comedy would take you. And it's just, there's something about like kind of sitting back. Like these celebrity comedians, the guys who should be willing to risk it all because you're already made. You already have like generational wealth, you don't have to worry about if you get canceled. You're fine. Like that you'll sit there and then at the time would have just stayed silent or maybe even cheered on as the people who were making this exact comment were getting like just destroyed. And then a couple years later, you go, all right, the water feels warm. Let me dive into that now. Just, it's tough.
Well, it's a hilarious take, and it's funny that it's so common sense and it's such simple observation through the mind of a comedic master who's able to just roll punchlines right off the tongue, wrap it in with the impression.
Yeah.
It's brilliance. Maybe he was even making these comments 2 years ago and they just didn't go viral, but it feels like we needed this 2 years ago. And it also just, it irks me like, listen, Dana Carvey's a fucking amazing comedian. Recently, I was over at my dad's place. We were watching like one of his Netflix specials, and I actually wasn't that familiar with the stand-up. Unbelievable.
Yeah, he's great.
Like, just unbelievable. But it also just annoys me with the amount of content of specifically COVID material I put out at the time. I put out a full hour of COVID stuff throughout the pandemic that was very good jokes. And like, it didn't get a ton of eyeballs, and it actually could have changed minds. And I think it was like an important topic to be making fun of. So there's something... I'm not even faulting Dana. There's something just that irks me when the market celebrates like, oh, wow, you really got them 2 years too late when it's irrelevant. And when I was personally putting out material at the time that no one cared about.
Yeah. No, I know.
No, and I mean, we got an audience here that care, but you get what I'm saying. Like, it just annoys me 2 years later when it's very safe for everyone to go, oh, look, we're really putting it to the machine. Oh, look at how obvious this is. And yeah, obviously we're lying to, yeah, all right, that was cool 2 years ago. 2 years ago, that would have been brilliant material that might have changed minds.
It would have been ballsy to do. It would have meant something while us unvaccinated were being like, legitimately oppressed under the law. Like I'm not like exaggerating or trying to be, I'm not like playing the victim. I don't do that. Like, I've got a great life. I've got a great family and a great career. I've got much better than I deserve. But just objectively speaking, like, the unvaccinated became second-class citizens all throughout this country. Many of them had their livelihoods destroyed because they didn't want to take this jab that they didn't need objectively at this point. And it's just like, it would have been nice to hear some of this when it mattered. It would have been nice to hear some of this during that time. And I'm not saying a joke can't be funny about something that happened 2 years ago. It's just that, like, there is this feeling of like, look, there's no way, even if you say like, oh, maybe he said this shit then and it just didn't go viral. It's like, nah, I don't think so. Because there was a time when if you said something like this, you would have been like targeted. If Jon Stewart had made that Wuhan bit a year earlier than he did, where it was still all the same information was out, all of it. As I remember, I don't know, I think it was either April or May of 2020. So like right in the height of the lockdowns, when I had Keith Knight on the show, the great Keith Knight. I'm going to have him back on soon. I love that guy. When I had Keith Knight on the show and we were talking about the lab leak theory, because that's when it first came out. It was like a month or two into this that we first heard that there's this lab. And actually, not just that we like knew there was a lab that was experimenting on coronaviruses, but that the evidence was really starting to show that like this wet market theory had a lot of holes in it, that the bats they were claiming didn't exist in that region and were like hundreds of miles away, and all the stuff like that was starting to point to like, this wet market thing. They couldn't find any bats in wet markets when they went there to look for them. Like, there was like a lot of holes in that theory. Anyway, but like, if Jon Stewart had done that bit in the summer of 2020, or even the winter of 2020, or even the spring of 2021 or whatever, it would have been like a huge fucking thing. And yes, he would have taken an unbelievable amount of heat for it. So what they do is they kind of like wait until you don't take heat for it anymore, and then I'll come do this bit. That's just like...
And it would have made a positive influence.
Yeah. It could have actually done something.
I get that this is being a little bit complainy of me, which, but I'm a Jew. I like to complain. That's kind of what I do.
It's hardwired into you.
Generally speaking, I hate comics who I see as fake edgy, where they're doing everything that's allowable, but then they go, oh my God, look at how dangerous I'm being, or wow, I'm really on the fringes. And usually they got TV credits, they had a TV career, and like, that's the gimmick. And as a person who definitely did not come through the traditional systems and still is not easily bookable in like any mainstream arena, that always annoys me, because it's like that I'm that. I'd like to get a little bit of that fanfare. You're not that. You're a great comic and you're doing great work, but like that's phony. That part of it's phony. So this kind of falls into the same thing where it's like, it's a great joke, but it's 2 years too late and you're all still like, oh my God, is he saying it?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's just the thing where it's like there's people were like unpersoned for questioning the fucking vaccine. Like, you know what I mean? Like there was a time, if you remember through this show, where we had to like, me and you had to have conversations about exactly how to put it, what words to use, what not to, you know what I mean? Like I like to think like I wouldn't even say that. There probably were a few things that I held back on through it where you have to make this calculation where you're like, look, I don't want to lose my fucking platforms. I think I'm less valuable in this fight if I lose fucking all of my platforms. So maybe there's a couple things I won't speculate about that I can't fucking prove, but I'm going to go like as far as I can go and really hammer home the things that I can. But we'd think about being like, how exactly do we say this? How do we put this so that we don't? Because YouTube was fucking really cracking down on anyone. I got
suspended multiple times.
Yeah, I know you did. Because you did like more deep dives into like vax injuries and like the bullshit.
Oh, at the
of
time,
the
you didn't want to read the preprint studies. That would get you in trouble.
Literally, you couldn't read the fucking studies. And now we're kind of at a moment where like that storm has passed. I use the example all of the time. Just because I think it's
like
kind
an
of
Iraq war joke now. Great. Good for you.
Yes. Well, the example I always use is the we must protect the Kurds, which if you remember when when Donald Trump was talking about pulling out of Syria, this was the big thing. We're abandoning the Kurds. And in that moment, everyone in the establishment is like, we're abandoning the Kurds. How can we do this? It was like 2019. How could you possibly? We love the Kurds. None of them care. None of them have checked in on the Kurds. The Kurds aren't even a topic. Are they being slaughtered right now? Are they in mansions? None of them care. It was just a thing but I use it as an example that there'll be this storm, and then as soon as it passes, it's passed. So in other words, right now, I'm not too concerned about having this conversation. There's so many things that we can talk about right now that would have been so dangerous to talk about 2 years ago. And the point is that that's when it mattered. And like, this is what I've said for a long time. This was kind of like the whole reason why I support the Mises Caucus and them having taken over the Libertarian Party and all this stuff is you're like, if the goal here, if what we're about is like inserting our ideas into the narrative, then it only really matters if you're willing to do it when it counts. It only really matters if you're willing. Now, that being said, as I said a few minutes ago, that you have to be smart about that. Don't make yourself a martyr, because that doesn't really help anything unless you do it on like a large enough scale. Definitely make sure you're taken care of and protected before you do that. But still, it's like, to hear these guys, there's just something really frustrating about it. And the thing that's kind of like, and I remember this with the Jon Stewart bit, feeling the same way. The thing that it's like a weird feeling inside, because on one level you're like, yes, thank you. Like, you see what's hilarious too. It's great to see that you're still the guy I admire. You know what I mean? Like, that's okay, great. But then it's like, oh man, what the fuck? Why couldn't you just do this when it was cool to do? It would have been so awesome to do. And particularly for like guys like, like me and you have like great careers. I'm not like, absolutely nothing to complain about. It's still, I really do not take anything for granted that I have, or at least that's very much true. Maybe not 100% true. We all take some things for granted, but I appreciate what we have. It's not lost on me that me and you travel to every city around this country and we sell out shows with our fans there. It's not lost on me that we have this platform with like a ton of people listening to it. And I'm grateful for all of that. But I'm not like financially set for life. I'm not in a position where I'm like, whatever, if my fucking career dries up tomorrow, my kids are taken care of for the rest of their life. Like I got to keep doing this. But these guys are in that situation. Jon Stewart and Dana Carvey and David Spade, they're all in that situation. They're good. So like, if we can be out here risking this shit, like, come on, you guys should be like way leading the charge, way more ahead of us on this. But whatever.
I guess you and I don't know how nice the waters of Epstein's Island are.
Man, all it takes is
they're
one
all-
invite.
these guys are in the system, you know?
One invite and
They're
turn this whole
playing ball,
goddamn
show
thing around.
business. They see it as, hey, look, I'm in the club and I'm age 50. I want to hang out in this club for another 20 years.
Yeah, I guess so. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Alpine Gold. Inflation, war, economic uncertainty all have a constant presence in our news cycle. Fear has driven people to buy stockpiles of gold and silver coins and bars. Spending them may be useful when buying a car, but not practical when buying gas or groceries. And what if you don't have any gold at all? Alpine Gold allows you to buy affordable gold specie legal tender as a form of money. They offer gold and silver accounts and a unique product called the Goldback, a 24-karat pure gold polymer note that's durable, beautiful, and most importantly, spendable. The Goldback is divisible gold that fits right into the monetary story of U.S. minted gold coins, providing you a way to use your gold as money. Plus, with their unique leaseback program, you can not only protect against the loss of purchasing power, but also grow your assets as well. There's limited space at preferred rates, so connect with Alpine Gold as soon as possible to lock in the best returns. Inflation, war, economic uncertainty, they're all prevalent right now. Sound money is crucial for wealth preservation and purchasing power protection. Alpine Gold Exchange offers gold, silver, and gold-back accounts. Goldback 24-karat pure gold polymer notes, durable, beautiful, and spendable. Alpine helps protect your wealth and preserve purchasing power for present and future generations. So right now, go to alpinegold.com. Let them know Part of the Problem sent you when you sign up. That's how you can help us out. But just go check them out, alpinegold.com. All right, let's get back into the show. All right, let's move on to the next topic. So I wanted to talk about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He had a town hall the other day, which was interesting. What was it? Newsmax, I think, is who hosted it, if I'm not mistaken. It's one of the big networks have yet to give him News Nation. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I confused those two. Hasn't gotten one of the big ones yet to give him like a full town hall like that. He did have that ABC interview a while back where they told you they wouldn't show you what he said because it's wrong, which was just priceless. But anyway, he had there were several interesting moments on that, but this seems to be the one that's going most viral. It was the first question of the town hall, and of course, it was about his position on vaccines. I thought this was very interesting. Let's play this, and then we can talk about it a bit.
One of the biggest controversies surrounding your candidacy is your stance on childhood vaccines. Nearly every scientific and medical organization, including the CDC, the FDA, the AMA, the American Academy of Pediatrics, all say you're wrong on this issue. This leads us to our very first question from our audience. It's Dr. Tariq Butt, who specializes...
I would ask you one thing. On what issue?
On childhood vaccines.
What about them?
And whether they ever cause autism or damage kids. They all say these vaccines have saved millions of lives.
Damage kids.
I don't think anybody has said they never have. There might be a child here, but overall...
Can you just pause it already for a second? There's an unbelievable dynamic that RFK has where, look, when it comes to this topic of vaccines particularly, right? All of the expert class refuse to engage with him. They are like, we will not debate this guy because it would be elevating him, even though he is having more of an impact than any one of them. I mean, maybe you could argue Fauci when he was given the bully pulpit of the president of the United States during COVID, but there's literally no other expert in the expert class who is talking about this issue to more people and reaching more people. But somehow they still hide behind this, like, it would be boosting his signal or legitimizing him if I were to come debate him on this topic. And so the only people who are willing to do it are journalists, but they just are so ill-equipped. Like he knows 10 million times more than them about all of this. So she even this line she has right here, the way she intros this is in such a slimy way to be like, all of these appeal to authority. All authorities think you're wrong. Anyway, let's go to a question. And then he goes, well, what am I wrong about? And she's like, vaccines. He's like, well, what about vaccines? And then she says that they ever cause autism or ever hurt children. And he goes, that they ever hurt children? And she goes, well, I don't think anybody's saying they don't ever hurt children. And he's like, no, you just said it. It's what you just said. What do you mean no one's saying it? You literally just said it. So it's already within 3 seconds. She's like falling apart. And this is what's so interesting. Like, however you feel, this is why I say, if you think RFK is wrong about all of his vaccine skepticism, or if you think he's wrong about part of his vaccine skepticism, but whatever, if you think he's wrong about his position on vaccines, you should be the one lobbying for one of these experts to debate him the most, because you're ceding the ground to him. You're making it so the only people who he has to talk to about this are Crystal Ball and this chick who don't know anything about it. They know nothing. And so, of course, he's going to eat their lunch, because whether he's right or wrong, he knows a lot about it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm certainly I don't know. As I've said before, I'm agnostic on kind of, aside from the COVID vaccine, I do not have strong feelings about any of these other vaccines because I haven't fucking researched them. The COVID vaccine is the only one I've really spent time fucking researching, because that seemed to be like the most relevant one to society for a while. And, but I couldn't debate RFK on the link between the MMR vaccine and autism, because I just don't know enough about it. And they're in the position where they're in the same position, but they're starting with, you're wrong. But you can't do that if you don't know anything.
I think that this is really interesting because they both start off this interview with dirty tricks. She starts off the interview in that he's got a lot of really interesting ground to cover. He's got a lot of ideas that would probably appeal to liberals. And right off the bat, they're trying to sandbag him with, hey, you're a lunatic, and there's the doctor with the question showcasing your lunatic position. Mm-hmm. So they try and sandbag him off the bat. He also plays a dirty trick back to them, which is, I call it the size and scope trick. So he goes to them, are you saying that there's never a problem? Because, yes, I guess that it would be factually, if you're a believer in vaccines, it would be inaccurate. Started by saying that. I understand. They both play dirty tricks at each other. The dirty trick he's playing is the equivalent of if you watched when they brought on Durham and all the Democrats were up there going, well, there was Russian interference. Yes, technically, or not interference, Russian misinformation campaign. Yes, technically there was Russian misinformation, but what does that mean? That they ran ads on Facebook?
I suppose.
You see what I'm saying? There is no scope and scale to it.
If Durham went up there and said there's absolutely never been any Russian misinformation, then he opens the door for that. He opens the door for them to be wait, so you're saying there's never been any?
I'm just saying an actual conversation about whether or not vaccines are good or bad rely on the scope and scale of risk and reward.
Yes. Well, okay. I agree with you on that.
It's great. He beats her in this little game. But I'm just saying they both start, if you're trying to have an honest conversation about vaccines, starting it off with, but there is it's not a very honest starting point from him. It's a good debate. It's a good debate play. But I'm saying they're both starting with dirty tricks.
I don't know if I agree. I think he responded to what she said. I think the guy, whatever you say about him, wants to have this conversation. And he does want to have the conversation about risk versus reward and all of that. Either way, I get your point. Let's play. So they throw to a doctor. Here. Let's play the rest of the clip.
I don't think anybody has said they never have. There might be a child here, but overall, all those organizations say vaccines are safe and have saved millions and millions of lives. But let's get to our audience question from Dr. Butts.
Good evening. Eradication of chickenpox and polio from the U.S. and many parts of the world is a direct result of regular vaccines. Measles, mumps, rubella, and many diseases are preventable, and there's little to no evidence of these diseases in vaccinated population. Your vaccine stance is dangerous to the health and well-being of millions. Medical experts are deeply concerned about your message. How can we help you to come to the side of science?
What was the question? How can you help me come to my senses?
No.
Side of science?
You are a very smart person.
Okay, so, I think most people don't know what my stance is on vaccines. I've never been anti-vaccine. And I've said that hundreds and hundreds of times, but it doesn't matter because that is a way of silencing me, using that pejorative to describe me as a way of silencing or marginalizing me. My position on vaccines, I think, I think virtually every American would agree with my stance on vaccines, which is that vaccines should be tested like other medicines. They should be safety tested. And unfortunately, vaccines are not safety tested. They're not. Of the 72 vaccine doses now mandated, essentially mandated, they're recommended, but they're really mandated for American children. None of them, not one, has ever been subject to a pre-licensing placebo-controlled trial.
Yes, they have.
No.
Yes, they have.
Okay, let me just say something. Dr. Fauci and many other people for many years said this, that Bobby Kennedy, when he says that, is wrong. So I met with Dr. Fauci in 2016, and I agreed to go on Trump's Vaccine Safety Commission, and I was with Aaron Siri and Lynn Redwood and a number of other people, and we said to him, can you show us one test from any vaccine, pre-licensing safety test? And he said, I'll send it to you. I can't find one now. He never did. So we sued him. We sued Aaron Siri and I sued HHS. And after a year of litigation and stonewalling, they said that they could not provide a single safety study for any vaccine that is on the childhood schedule, pre-licensing safety study. So anybody who wants to read that can go to to the Children's Health Defense website, and you can read HHS's admission that not a single one has ever been safety tested pre-licensing. Now, what I've said is other medicines are required to do that, and we should have to do that for vaccines. If I'm wrong, show me the test, show me the study. You won't be able to, because there are none. That means that we don't know what the long-term risks are, the risk profile of those products. And I'll give you mentioned chickenpox. So when CDC was thinking of recommending this chickenpox vaccine as mandating for children, they did a study, and the scientist they hired to do that study was a scientist called Gary Goldman, a contract scientist. And he did the study in an isolated place in California called Antelope Valley, a long-term study. And what they find is if you give the chickenpox vaccine, mass vaccinate with chickenpox, it stops chickenpox, but it causes shingles epidemics later on, which are 20 times as deadly as chickenpox. So nevertheless, despite those studies, we mandated for American children in this country. In Europe, they don't. If you go to the British National Health Service website right now, you can read on that where they say, we do not recommend chickenpox vaccines because it causes shingles epidemics later on. And that's the problem. You can't just look at, you can say that this product is going to prevent this particular disease, but you have to look at the long-term impacts. Vaccines, like other medicines, have injuries that have long diagnostic horizons and long incubation periods that if you do not do long-term studies on placebo-controlled studies, comparing vaccinated populations to unvaccinated populations, you won't do it. Let me just give you one quick other example. The most popular vaccine in the world is the DTP vaccine, diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. We banned it. We got rid of it in this country because it was causing injuries, brain injuries, severe brain injuries, or death to 1 in every 300 children. We used it in the 80s, and that's why there was all this litigation against vaccine companies that precipitated the passage of the Vaccine Act that then gave them immunity from liability. But in Europe, they don't use it. In America, they don't use it. But we give it to 161 million African children a year. So Bill Gates asked the Danish government to support that program and said it saved 30 million lives. The Danish government said, show us the data. He wasn't able to. So they went to Africa and did their own studies. And they looked at 30 years of DTP data. And what they found shocked them all. They found that girls who got the DTP were dying at 10 times the rate of unvaccinated girls. But they were dying of things that nobody had ever associated with the vaccine. They were dying of diphtheria, of anemia, malaria, bilharzia, pulmonary disease, respiratory disease, and pneumonia. And nobody noticed for 30 years that it was the vaccinated girls and not the unvaccinated girls who were dying. And what had happened is these girls were not dying of diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. The vaccine had protected them against those, but it had also ruined their immune systems. And they were unable to defend themselves against other just minor diseases that other kids who had hardy immune systems were able to fend off. So that's why you need these long-term studies. And that's why I'm worried that we don't do that here in the United States.
And we do have evidence of that, like there are clinical trials, randomized trial, and there's a difference between association and causation, right? Somebody can take a medication and get involved in a motor vehicle accident. It doesn't mean that, that is associated, but it was not caused by medication unless we get to the bottom of it. So many times we should continue to figure out ways to, for the safety of vaccines, of course, and medical community is always looking for that. But at the same time, like we can really come to agreement that vaccines are important. They do prevent those diseases. After all, smallpox was in the world, all around the world. It's not there anymore. So there is evidence of that.
So, okay, let's just pause it for a second. We'll finish back up. Okay. That was a long stretch. I know we don't usually play clips that are that long, but I kind of thought this was important to get to. One of the things that I think is interesting about this is that this is about as close as we've seen of an expert being willing to have an exchange. I mean, I understand it's not like a real debate. He's just asking a question, but you see kind of a little glimpse into what Robert Kennedy Jr. is prepared to do back and forth with an expert. And I'm just kind of struck by how much more compelling what RFK Jr. had to say was, and then this doctor's response was just so weak. It was just like, well, correlation is not causation, and, vaccines do good stuff, so we got to keep researching and find out. Whereas RFK had laid down like these excellent points, like these unbelievable points that are just hard to argue with. That you're like, well, look, okay, we had this one vaccine that we pulled off because it was causing brain injuries, and we still give it to Africans. But and then as a response to that, they gave these pharmaceutical companies immunity. Like, why should they have immunity over this? Why should there be none of these placebo preclinical studies? Like, why should? And it's just this kind of thing where you're like, it's kind of hard to deny that what he's saying sounds pretty compelling here. I don't know. Like, any thoughts on this, Rob?
He definitely demolishes. He undeniably demolishes the guy. Also, I think he could probably sum it up to, hey, I'm just interested in making kids safer. That's a good bullshit spin, because what does safer mean?
Yeah.
And you could just condense, I want to make kids safer. There's been problems with vaccines in the past. I don't think they do enough testing, and vaccines are great, but we could probably just do better to make sure that they're all good or whatever. I don't know. It doesn't really, but even all of this, it sounds to me, I'd have to dig in. I have not dug into vaccines. This is not a topic of expertise, but sometimes I can kind of recognize tricks. What are there, 70 vaccines on the market? And so one of his examples is one that we pulled for a safety profile. Well, it sounds like we must have decent mechanisms for finding out when things are.
But that's his point. His point is that, and then in respect, he's basically saying his argument is that at this time and before the vaccines, he was kind of on board with the original vaccine schedule. He's saying that as a response to this bad one, then the pharmaceutical companies were given immunity for liability, and then they just started pushing all these new vaccines that hadn't properly been tested. This is more or less his case.
I didn't catch that from what he was saying.
Well, I've seen this in other interviews with him, so I don't know if he made that exactly clear there. So I don't think it's bullshit. But again, I'm kind of agnostic on this. I'm just saying it's kind of interesting here, where for the first time we see an expert going back and forth with him. He lays out all of this stuff, and then the expert is unable to tell him oh no, you got this wrong or this wrong. This was demonstrably not true. There's no hole seemingly in his armor that this guy was able to point to. It's just kind of this oh, well, causation, isn't necessarily the same thing as correlation. And, we agree vaccines are important and blah, blah. It's just kind of interesting. Wow. All right. Please show me the expert who just tears him apart.
Is that his position that up until a certain year, all the vaccines approved were okay, and then once they got rid of
I've heard him say that he was on board. He said, I think something where he said there were like 4 vaccines that were recommended when he was a kid, and he's on board like those. He might have even said here. Let's play the end of this clip because he might have touched on this in this.
We passed the Vaccine Act. When I was a kid, there was only 3 vaccines, and I was compliant. But when we passed the Vaccine Act, it made vaccines very, very valuable. And all of a sudden, there was a gold rush to add a lot of new vaccines to the schedule for diseases that aren't even casually contagious, like rotavirus, like hepatitis B. Why are we giving hepatitis B vaccine to a 1-day-old child? Hepatitis B, the major vectors for that are it's sexually transmitted or by needles. Why would you give that to a 1-day-old child? It's really a profit motive. Now, you're right that correlation is not causation, but the Institute of Medicine has looked at the vaccine schedule and said in their 2011 report, there are over 150 injuries that are likely to be associated with vaccines that have never been studied. So it's the CDC's responsibility to do those studies, and they've been ordered again and again and again to do them, and they have refused. And that's wrong. We need an agency that is putting public health first and not pharmaceutical profit.
How nervous this doctor looks.
He's like, I am losing.
About the opioid crisis. The opioid crisis, started with the oxycodone. Now it's, fentanyl. But the same companies that got the FDA to lie to us about the addictiveness, lie to every doctor in this country about the addictiveness of oxycodone and get a whole generation addicted. Those are the same companies that make these, other products. And the 4 companies that make vaccines in this country, Merck, Sanofi, Glaxo, and Pfizer, have paid over $35 billion in criminal penalties over the past decade for lying to doctors, for falsifying science, for defrauding regulators. And we need to keep an eye on them. We can't just trust them. If they say it's a vaccine, we all trust it. We need to have actual science on it. And I think that's all I say. I don't want to get rid of vaccines. If you want to take a vaccine, you should be able to do it. But we need good science, and that's all I've asked for.
But so, what do you say to people? I mean, it sounds like you're saying that every scientist, every government, our governments around the world, doctors like Dr. Butts are all lying about vaccines.
I've never said anything like that.
The AMA, the American Academy of Pediatrics, they all, and the FDA says, and in fact, on its website, you can clearly see vaccines they go through 3 stages of FDA testing against double-blind placebos. They already do that testing for vaccines.
Elizabeth, you can say that. I'm telling you.
I'm not saying that. The FDA,
the FDA is not saying that.
Yes,
because
they do on their website.
They will not tell you that that there's any vaccine that has ever undergone a long-term placebo-controlled trial prior to licensure. They will not, because it's not true. You can
pause for a second. I don't love that he won't just say, own it, and be like, yes, that's what I'm telling you about these agencies, and look at what they just did with COVID, or look at what the example I just told you with the Purdue family and the painkillers. I was saying that during COVID. I thought it was fascinating that they were yelling about before they were called Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson got the largest ever fine, like in the history of medicine, for
baby powder.
No. Then it was the baby powder thing, which I got the joke out of, where I was like, they sold a product called baby powder that turned out it had cancer. If you ever thought there would be a conspiracy theory, baby powder actually caused, the product called baby powder caused cancer. And at the same time, government's yelling, you have to trust this company. Like, those two things don't make sense together. This wasn't the joke, but I'm just saying I can't hold both these things true at the same time. That there's a company that put out a product literally called baby powder that causes cancer, and yet you're telling me that by force and mandate I have to trust them on a new product. So, and then it's funny that she sitting there goes, "Oh my God, are you saying that these people can't be trusted?" Yeah. Yes. That's what I'm saying to you.
Look, there's something, and it's funny, when we were playing back a few weeks ago, the clip that was taken out of context of RFK, And then we said, oh, this is actually what's happening. He does have, and perhaps, look, me and you have a different style and a different worldview, but we have a different style.
Mine's
than
to be
RFK.
unlikable and not care.
Yes.
It means I can't be rich and famous.
But he's trying to do something else here. And he's big on like a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down type messaging. Whereas me and you are much more like flamethrowers who are like, yo, no, yes, I'm telling you they're all corrupt and lying to you. Like that's what he's kind of like, he's taking it in a way where but look, he's also, and this is kind of why I think RFK is like an important thing. His presidential campaign is an important thing. He's running as a Democrat. He's trying to put this in a way that like can get mass support amongst the Democratic voting base. And so like, I get your point. My heart is with you, but he's also doing something a little bit different here. Here, let's finish off this clip and then we'll talk about a few more things.
Sir, they will not, because it's not true. And they've, you can go to my website and see where HHS says, yeah, there are none.
Well, we're competing websites saying different things.
Let me say this. I'm not saying the AMA is lying or the doctors are lying. What I'm saying is the FDA does lie. And the FDA lied to us about Vioxx. They knew that the Vioxx was causing heart attacks, but they let doctors believe that it was a medicine that was good, beneficial for headaches and arthritis without telling it that they were going to kill me. And they ended up killing between 120,000 and 500,000.
All these doctors and all these scientists around the world who say vaccines are safe and have saved millions and millions of lives.
The same people said Vioxx was safe. The same people said opioids, that oxycodone was not addictive because FDA said it and they believe them. And that's the problem. We have a corrupt federal agency that's lying to the AMA, to all of those agencies and all of the doctors, and they believe them. But those agencies are controlled by pharma. That is the problem. And that's what I'm trying to end as president.
You know that your own family doesn't support, many members of your own family don't support your position on vaccines. Your brother, your sister, and your niece have all written an editorial saying on vaccines, Bobby is wrong. His work on vaccines is having heartbreaking consequences. What's your response? Your own family thinks you're wrong on this.
Does your family agree with everything that you said?
Definitely not. You got me on that one.
I mean, and then at the end, just like, it's almost like to me, this is like humiliating for this woman to have to end after all of that. We go like, well, your own family. It's just like such a dirty bullshit trick. Like, what does that mean? Who amongst us, I'm curious for like people like even listening, most people listening to this show probably have strong, views about several different issues. I'm sure a lot of you don't agree with me and Rob on everything. But who amongst you don't have family members who like disagree with you on certain political issues? And then even this woman has to concede, yeah, of course, that's all of us. The difference is that the Kennedys are like a famous family. And so I'd understand where if like some of them even wanted to be like, if he's out there saying these things, be like, hey, for the record, I don't agree on that. He doesn't speak for all of us. But like, what does that mean? Very quickly, just to add some context to this, Brian, if you could pull up just that photo that we have up here, is that this is what Robert Kennedy is referring to. These are the official questions that he said. He said to the HHS, said, please explain how HHS justifies licensing any pediatric vaccine without first conducting a long-term clinical trial in which the rate of adverse reaction is compared to the subject group and a control group receiving an inert placebo. And the response from HHS is inert placebo controls are not required to understand the safety profile of a new vaccine and are thus not required.
I got to say, I might have to actually dig in because there's just too many specifics missing here for me to like actually kind of weigh in. But when it came to the mRNA technology, that was a totally new technology. So I understood why, as it was not really a vaccine, it was marketing, it didn't make sense for them to expedite the process. I don't know what I'm about to say to be accurate. So I'm prefacing. I've not dug in. It's theoretically possible that vaccines in general, giving someone a dead virus, is a pretty safe mechanism, that there isn't a high risk profile, and so they don't need to go through the same amount of testing that they would with a new drug, because a new drug is a new drug, whereas a vaccine is a old technology, and so like a different usage of the old technology is actually not as dangerous.
I think that's possibly true. That's possibly true.
you might be able to also further the argument that when it comes to certain diseases, there actually is a risk of leaving people unvaccinated. And so amongst the known risk of vaccines being relatively safe and a benign technology, and once again, I don't know, I haven't dug in. It's actually, I'm like, my OCD is getting a little bit irked where there just aren't enough specifics here. Like,
well, but the point you're making is a fair point, and I'm also not an expert in this, so yeah, like I don't exactly know, and this is why an expert should sit down and have a discussion with RFK for 3 hours. This is why we'd all benefit from actually hearing a back and forth between someone who can hold their own with him, because maybe there's a point to that, and maybe that case can be argued. However, what you have is some journalist, when he goes, there's been no pretrial studies against a placebo, and she goes, yes, there has been. There have been. And he's like, no, there haven't been. And here we see the answer from HHS saying, no, we don't need those. So I don't know, maybe an expert can argue why they don't need those. I'm open to the possibility that there's a really good case for that. But make it then. Someone's got to make it and stand up, and then he gets to counter your point. You know what I mean? Like, that's the beauty of debate.
There does seem to be, and I understand this so limited just because from one conversation I had with the doctor on my show earlier in this week, I don't understand the argument that it's dangerous to not give somebody something that wasn't available 10 minutes ago. So if I invent a new vaccine that did not exist 10 minutes ago, people have been exposed to whatever natural element. Like, I understand that people are dropping dead left and right, but we're not in the middle of avian, like whatever the flu thing that
bubonic plague or something.
We're not in the middle of something like that. So the idea that you're going to come to market with a new technology and you can't do a double-blind trial because you're going to be leaving some group of the population, I guess, exposed to whatever the risk element is, absent of being in a bubonic plague environment, I don't understand how something that wasn't available 10 minutes ago is life-threatening if someone doesn't get it.
Yeah. No, I tend to agree with you on that. By the way, changing gears slightly, but sticking with the RFK thing, I wanted to kind of make this point because I saw on Twitter today a lot of people who I think typically have been interested in the RFK campaign were jumping on him. This is unrelated to vaccines, but he tweeted out about the Supreme Court banning affirmative action in higher education. And he said, I know many Americans feel that purely race-based decisions are unfair. However, this feeling misses important context. The effects of racist policies going back centuries are now self-perpetuating. Affirmative action understands this and uses race-based policies to undo the effects of racist policies. So he definitely had a bad take on affirmative action. People are jumping on him left and right for this. It's a hot button issue, and I understand why he's getting criticized. But I've gotten like a bunch of people who are tweeting at me and be like, "Oh, this is your boy. This is the guy who blah blah blah. All of this. Who you've had to look at him." And it's just a lot of people jumping on him. And this is, as I said in the beginning, my job here is to make libertarians a little bit less autistic and the rest of the world a little bit more autistic. That's all I can hope for. But look, the truth is, look, I'm not, none of us, certainly me and you, and I don't think anyone else in our world who's like kind of been like, whoa, this RFK guy is really like doing something cool here, are saying that he is a perfect libertarian or that he's right on every issue or that he, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, obviously, like, he's a liberal Democrat and we're going to have disagreements with him about a lot of issues. I just would encourage people to I'm not saying you have to vote for the guy or campaign for the guy or be all in on RFK. I'm just saying don't miss the forest for the trees here. Like, I'm not shocked that a Democrat had the Democratic line position on affirmative action. I don't think any of us should be. The point is that this guy is creating a moment right now. He's forced a conversation that's a really important and interesting one. And he's a Democrat in 2023 who's so good on so many of the important issues. That's kind of what's happening here. In the same way that it's like, someone's got to just be the best Democrat. Someone's got to be the best right-winger. Someone's got to be the best libertarian. Someone, you know what I mean? Now, of the best libertarian, I expect that guy to be like perfect on everything because I'm a libertarian. I think libertarians are right about all this stuff. Now, a right winger, it might be great. You might be like, hey, we should end the Federal Reserve and have sound money, and we shouldn't fight all these wars, or we should just protect our own country, and we should blah blah. But he's kind of a protectionist when it comes to like, you know, China or something like that. And me and you might go like, no, actually free trade is superior to this protectionist model, but blah, blah, blah. But okay, he's still the best right winger because he's great on the Fed and he's great on war and he's great on the deep state or something like that. And like, same with a left winger. There might be a left winger who's like, you know, whatever, wants to, you know, is good on like whatever issues, war and like real important issues and stuff like this. A left wing, you know, is good on the COVID vaccine, good on big pharma, good on like, you know, the banking complex or something like that. But they want some redistribute. Jesus Christ.
Wealth redistribution.
Well, some wealth redistribution, right? So, okay, they're just the best left winger. That's just the point I'm making with this. Is like, look, criticize him for his bad takes. I'm not saying he's above criticism. He's certainly not. But it's like, but understand the moment that's going on here. Like, the guy is single-handedly humiliating all of the fucking COVID expert class. That's worth something. Don't just ignore that. You know what I mean? Like, you can't be in this thing where you're holding out for perfection. And so when something much better comes along, you're just going to look for the first thing to dismiss that on.
Yeah. And what a great topic to educate people on, regulatory capture, and that these appeal to authority institutions that other people will argue gives them a right to censor us or have actually just been, taken over by corporations interested in profit.
Yeah. And look at what this journalist is reduced to. For any person who's like a thinking person at all, who can rub two brain cells together. It's like, what a weak, like astoundingly weak argument it is to be like, so you're saying the FDA and the CDC and the AMA get it wrong? That's what you're saying? All three of those like organizations? It's like, it's literally on the equivalent of like someone is standing up in Nazi Germany and being like, so you're telling me Himmler, Goebbels, and Hitler all get it wrong about the Jews? You're telling me they're all wrong? Like, every Nazi organization has the same view of the Jews, and you're telling me you're right and they're wrong? Like, what does that mean? Yes, these are all like fucking, you know, the AMA is like some fucking, you know, government, you know, like funded institution. I mean, they may be only partially funded by the government, but they're still like connected. And the CDC and the FDA are just government bureaus. What do you mean? You're telling me they can't all get it wrong? Of course they can. Like, so anyway, it's just, there's something interesting about all of that. It is, like you said, it's a very important topic for like people to be, a conversation to be forced about. And he's the guy who's doing it right now. So I'm glad he's doing it, and I hope he keeps doing it. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to agree with him about everything he ever says about guns or affirmative action or something like that.
I'm going to have to dig into the vaccine thing a little bit more, but like amidst when I hear some of the arguments, and I'm just like, this is not, one of them is they go, well, the Amish don't have any of these problems. The Amish don't keep records. Chances are if you have one of these problems, they just hit you in the head with the shovel. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah. No, we don't
I don't know what's going on in the Amish communities. You think if a kid has autism, he's seeing an expert, or they're being diagnosed at the same rates?
What was the old Iranian leader? Fuck, what was his name? He was the last, he was the Iranian leader like 10 years ago or something like that. I'm blanking on his name anyway, but he said something about, they asked him what he thought about homosexuals, and he said, we don't have them in Iran. Ahmadinejad, that's right. Yeah. He goes, oh, we don't have them. We don't have that problem in Iran. He goes, that's an American thing. I don't know about that. Like, it was just such a great way to say it. It's like, it's almost on the level of that where you're going like, well, I don't know. They don't have any gays in Iran. It's like, yeah, they probably do. Like, they probably do. He's just saying they don't. So like, right. We just don't know with stuff like that.
How are you controlling for pollution, diet, older parents, other medications? And once again, I haven't dug in, but like what's missing from this conversation is the specifics. So fine, you're a vaccine lunatic. What vaccines do you take issue with? What are the specific issues with those vaccines?
Well,
How do
look,
we correct
he laid it out on his Rogan episode. I mean, he talked about a lot of this stuff, but this is where, for someone like me, and I think I'm in a fairly similar situation to you, Rob, where I'm just kind of like, look, I don't know. And I do feel like, I don't know if you subscribe to Tom Wood's newsletter.
Oh, I gotta get on those.
Yeah, they're great. They're really, really great. By the way, I recommend everyone.
They're awesome.
Yeah, he's the best.
No, I meant the pamphlets. He puts out like the little books.
The ebooks. Yes,
Yeah.
he puts out a lot of ebooks. They're all phenomenal. Go to tomwoods.com is his site. Sign up for his newsletter. He's the OG, fucking just the best. So he wrote this thing the other day that really stuck with me, and he said that and I think this is where this kind of describes at least where I'm at, and I think probably where a lot of us are. So he goes he's at his doctor's, and his doctor was like, oh, you because of your age or whatever, you qualify for the shingles vaccine. And his doctor goes, it's 92% effective against shingles, so you should get it. And Tom was writing in this letter, and he goes 5 years ago, there's no question, I just would have gotten it. I would have just gone, yeah, all right, my doctor, he obviously knows this a lot better than me, so I'll just get it. If that's, you say it's 92% effective, okay, I don't want to get shingles, let's do it. And he just goes, no, I'm gonna wait, and I'll look into it. And he's like, now, because of the last few years, I'm in this position where I have to go, well, when you say it's 92% effective, I know how they got to that data that the COVID vax was 100% effective. I've looked at those studies and seen what nonsense that was. So is this nonsense too? Or is it just like that? Now I have to go and actually do a deep dive on this before I decide if I'm going to inject myself with this thing, And so there's just a lot of us who are in this position where like, I don't really know, man. I don't know. But now, after seeing what they did with this vaccine, like, okay, now I don't trust any of you. And so here's this RFK guy saying all this stuff. I don't know. I don't exactly know whether he's right or wrong. And this is why it would be really useful to see one of these experts sit down mano a mano with him and go back and forth responding. And I know that people will be like, that's not how science is debated. Science is debated through peer-reviewed literature or something like that. And you're like, yeah, look.
Like the Lancet. That's an excellent organization.
Well, look, nobody is suggesting we abolish the peer review practice. Nobody's suggesting that we no longer do peer-reviewed papers.
It's a circle jerk of academics stamping of approvals on the other guy who works for the institutions.
Yeah, I mean, what's his name? James Lindsay got peer-reviewed papers about rape culture in dogs, right? So, like, I'm just saying it's not a flawless process. But there's value in it.
Someone, I think you told me the story, someone got Mein Kampf republished that he just like
Oh, no, that was James Lindsay too. He just took out
so
Jews.
Hilarious.
He took out Jews and put in white men.
Oh my God,
and
that's
got
the
it
funniest thing anyone's ever done.
Now, these are in the social sciences or whatever, but still the point stands that it's like, this is not an impervious process in itself. But there's a different type of value that a discussion or even an informal or a formal debate bring. And the value that a debate, especially a long form, like informal debate, where you can go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with a reasonable, good faith moderator, the value of that is that they get to respond to what RFK said. And then he gets to respond to what they said. And then they can respond back to that and back to that. And it does tend to kind of illuminate more truth that way. Because you can see if any of their arguments start falling apart. Now, people can say, yes, to some degree, does it favor the superior rhetorician? Does it favor whoever has better rhetoric? Okay, to some degree. Like, yeah, there's truth to that. But like, okay, so find someone who's decent at that, who can do it. And like, let them go back and forth on this stuff. I think it would be very helpful for a lot of us to see that. There's people who are like searching for truth tend to want to see things like that. Anyway, it was an interesting moment, and I think RFK did a very good job. And I do think that what he showed right there was also pretty. Look, he's not exactly like a great politician in the sense that he's not coming up with like snazzy campaign slogans and doing this. He's very long-winded. He wants to really explain himself. He's not really playing the politics game per se, but in a similar sense, that's kind of his appeal, that he's not coming off like that. He's coming off like a genuine person who wants to have a conversation. But I do think that there was something very savvy, politically speaking, about that, where if he can kind of like put this out there, it's just like, look, like, as you kind of said, look, I'm concerned about the safety of kids. I don't think these things have been tested enough. And look, these organizations have lied to us a lot of times before. And we should have more studies about all of this stuff. We should look into this more. That seems to me to not come off like that kooky of a position. That seems to come off like very common sense. So anyway, let's leave on that. All right, that's going to be our show for today. Thank you guys all very much for listening. RobbieTheFire.com, ComicDaveSmith.com. We'll catch you next time. Peace.